watch new Survivor. We're stuck in a bad dream, so we're watching an old season with a silly pirate theme. Of course there's a new theme song, but it's as half-assed as our plans. And then says something, mumbo something, a word that rhymes with plans. Jon will make some dumb jokes, Andy likes to yell and curse. Something about some backup hosts. How could hell be any worse? We'll spend the whole time wishing that our lives were back on track. But until then, it's Pirate Survivor. We can all be glad for that. It's the Purple Rock Whatever Podcast, our mateys.
Hello and welcome to the Purple Rock Survivor Podcast. We are here to talk about the next to last episode of the Pearl Islands. I think there's a fancy word for that, but right now it's not my head.
Penultimate.
That's the one. And with me, I'm your host Andy. With me is Matt and Emma. And I think we're a lot more excited to talk about this week's episode than we were last week because it was fun, right? That was fun.
This is one I have been waiting for. This is, when early on when I was sort of like, when do we get to the fireworks factory? Obviously, Outcast, obviously, Dead Grandma, but this is one I was like,
yeah, this is one of those that helps build in our high opinion of Pearl Islands as a season. Probably one of the reasons why we chose it as an option to watch in the first place. And yeah, I think it really paid off. Again, this is not the first time for any of us, first time as an adult for one of us, but how did you feel watching it now, and how does that compare to what you remember, if anything, then? Because for me, it was huge. I loved it. It was great for a couple of reasons. One, it's just great. That two, dude bros are just living it up, talking about how the girls, always girls, great look.
Always girls.
Couldn't do anything. Meanwhile, the women are, totally flipping the game on them. Perfectly amazing, satisfying. But it was also a huge thing back then because Survivor did not change very much back then, So just the very fact that the path that things seemed to be going along did not go that way was still very thrilling. Like, yes, it happened in Marquesa. It had happened a bunch in the season right before this, but this still was fresh enough that like a moment like this really stood out as like Survivor could be something different. What was your experience the first time you saw this, Matt?
Well, it wasn't that long ago for me, honestly, because first time I saw this was only a couple of years. So
yeah, I understood that. Emma.
Yeah, much better.
I mean, again, I just don't have like the strongest memories of that.
Yeah, but you were looking forward to this one. You had a memory.
Well, again, it's not the first time I've watched this as an adult, so you made that up. I remember it from watching it as an adult. But I mean, I can imagine I had a great time. You've got a lot of girls rule, boys drool going on, and that's always fun. And yeah, I mean, like you were saying, the sort of always calling them girls, that's something that doesn't normally bother me. Like, I'm a little guilty of that myself, even. Like, I just find the word woman so, like, stilted, and I always say guys, so it's, like, easy, thing. But the way, like, it's just one of those things where you can, like, there's that Twitter meme, that was going around of, like, this would be the, like, what's something that's not sexist but feels sexist, and I was like, this probably is.
Like, this just plain is. Like, this is
exactly like there was in a way where, like, Lil, I think, referred to them as the girls, and like, that's fine. But there are ways men could do that in like a different context, and the girls might vote together, like, that's not a big deal, but you could just, it oozed from their pores.
Yeah, it's only a slight step up from females, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now I will let you kind of share what it was like. Let's get into what it was like now. We know what's going to happen. Turnabout is a common thing now in Survivor. Matt, how did you like watching it this time versus whenever the last time you saw it?
I mean, it's still really satisfying and thrilling because you just want to see these two get their comeuppance. It's not about the fact that there's a turnabout or that, the people on the bottom get together and flip the game. It's about the fact that we don't like these two. They've been acting like a-holes for a while here, and they've been acting superior and thinking they're better than everyone, and they're just dumb in this episode, and the show highlights it repeatedly, and it flips the game on them. So it's really satisfying to see them get their comeuppance for being really bad at the game in this moment.
Yeah, and I should clarify, like back then, flipping the game usually for me was the people I don't like get comeuppance. Like I was still very much like rooting for, you know, certain people that were more likable. You know, it was starting to turn because, yeah, I found like Rob Cesternino's play very thrilling. But like what I liked about Marquesa is the people that seemed like they acted like they couldn't lose lost. That was what was fun. So this had that double thing that like frankly, it seemed like these jerks were going to win, you know, or succeed based on the game 4. I'm still mad at them for what they did to Rupert back then. So you're getting all of that. They're acting like jerks. They finally, you know, get their, you know, their comeuppance for that. They get their comeuppance for betraying the sanctity of, you know, an alliance, and more importantly, you know, of Rupert. And then, yeah, the added level of, you know, their sexist arrogance. And the show, as we've already started talking, does not hide it at all. They played this completely straight up. And we saw it like a few times this season that, you know, I think with Burton's first vote out, they did obscure it. They don't give us, you know, it seemed like, frankly, if Johnny's fair play is going to go one way or the other, it's probably on Burton's side. They'd never clue us in that Sean knew anything about it. Turns out he didn't. So that, you know, until the last minute, which we found out the next episode. But like that was a surprise for the audience. They withheld key information. The Rupert vote, they didn't withhold any information, and, you know, ended up being less thrilling as a result. What did you think here? That, yeah, they pretty much, they show us like, hey, do you think the girls are going to do anything? Nah. Cut to, hey, we should vote those guys out, right? How did that play for you, Emma?
I mean, I think it's great. I think these kind of comeuppance episodes are so fun. Like, you can't do it all the time, but a really well deployed one is so good. Like, I mean, you know, spoilers for a later season, but like the best episode of San Juan del Sur, no offense to the great Natalie Anderson, is the douchebag episode. It's fucking good. And I mean, he just handed them everything on a silver platter, but these guys are not that much better, you know, with their behavior. At one point, you know, pretty early on in the episode, you know, my husband was just like, just cut to the end and vote Burton out, like, and not in a like it's so obvious that's what's going to happen, but in a like I need to see that happen.
Right.
And he was not like, except for, you know, the first time when Burton is similarly, you know, hoisted by his own petard, like most of it, he hasn't really had that much to say about Burton. It's been very much like, you know, Johnny Fairplay. So they're good at, you know, getting that hate in on people you may not have that strong of opinions about, but it certainly helps when those guys are making decisions and giving confessionals like that.
Matt?
Yeah, no, I mean, that just echoes exactly what I feel like. It's, you know, it's so much more satisfying because of the way they've been acting this entire time. The episode plays it straight because it doesn't need to hide it. They know there's going to be entertaining, you know, even if they tell us what's going to happen, because the entertainment isn't in the surprise of what happens. The entertainment is in the way it happens.
Yeah. And I think it also just shows.
Sorry, if I can just say one other thing is also I think part of it is, you know, the surprise, like that suspense is usually when it's like, okay, someone, you know, I want one alliance to succeed or another, like here's, you know, the person I want to go home versus the person I, you know, a fan favorite or something like that. But in this, the alternate option was Lil, so it's just like, it's not like we're like stressing out like, oh, like worst case scenario, Lil went home. So it's just, you might as well just really lay it on thick about Burton.
I suppose they could have built it if the material was there that will Lil do the thing that she needs to do to save herself, or will she end up being a victim of her own indecision? But yeah, no, and I think the lesson here is survivors just got to mix it up. Like, you know, too often people leap to the complaint that, you know, they just did this to blindside the audience. Why didn't they do that? Instead of being like, yeah, but wasn't it fun? Like, it was thrilling. I think people are right if they say that like you shouldn't always do it, right? And maybe Survivor is a little addicted to the blind side. They are certainly addicted to calling things blind sides that are not blind sides. But I think it's just like, no, sometimes they should do it, but sometimes it is absolutely the right decision to give us everything and just let us have some fun, because yeah, it's great times. Like there are, honestly, like I don't know how many like times in the history of this show is there like a setup just this you know, satisfying, that the whole way through we know that these people are going to fail, and we get to see it happen. You know, Emma points out one. There's a few more, but not, usually this is not a show in which bad behavior is punished, right? And frankly, that's not really what's happening here. You know, it's 3 people made a decision versus 2, but the way they edit it and the way they're able to talk about it and the decision that Burton and Jon make in order to lead this happen, it feels that way. And that's great. You know, like sometimes a reason for liking an event in Survivor or a season doesn't have to be more complicated than, man, it sure was fun seeing those assholes eat it.
Yep.
So yeah, I approve that they did not really hide it. Like they didn't even really, like they show a bit of Lil being like, should I, shouldn't I? But not really, you know, there wasn't any doubt which way she was going the time I went there. So the show also, I think, took a great pleasure in, you know, not only like telling us what was like going to happen, but why it was going to happen. And that was the decision for Burton to choose Jon on the reward. And, you know, instantly they point to why this is a problem, why this is going to do. Did you let's just have, first off, let's just talk about what a dumbass decision that was.
I mean,
very bad.
Yeah, like if Burton had taken Lil, does that just avert the entire thing there?
100%. I have no doubt in my mind. Yeah. If Lil is not there with those 2 women at that time, and frankly, playing right into her victim complex, that's just driving probably her entire life, let's be real, but it's certainly her Survivor time since like the first 3 days, then no, it doesn't happen. Like and we'll get into this too, but she's heartbroken over the very idea that Darrah would go 4th or 5th instead of 4th. Like, you know, this is like, so that she would turn on Burton after he takes her on a reward. No, it would not happen. So 100%.
Especially if Burton managed to actually give her like a final 2 deal, or at least indications of it. Right. But like, well, I took you on this reward, didn't I? You know, that, and then that's good enough.
Yeah, and she would have her time to whine about the Darrah decision, and I think Burton would have the time to make her feel better about it. Yeah, I think 100% this does not happen if Lil goes. So yeah, it's all about that decision. And you know, I'll say this, and I believe Emma is going to back me up on this. As soon as he picks Jon, my 11-year-old watching this for the first time ever, although his 3rd season, so a little different, was like, that's dumb. How was it in your living room, Emma?
Yep, exact same thing. Husband's like, well, that was a mistake. Instantly.
Yeah. Like before the show even starts to tell us that it's dumb, before they, you know, show obviously Lil and the women start to make this plan, before they even show like Burton and Jon like preemptively like talking about, well, it's like, maybe it wouldn't be so bad, but we're not worried. Instantly, it's like, what are you doing, man? Everybody knows it. And deep down, Burton and Jon know it too. They just don't think anything could happen to them. And the question I had watching this is like, I mean, obviously it's a stupid ass decision. We have the scoreboard, but you kind of get at least why, what fed into their arrogance, of course, besides, you know, misogyny.
I mean, Darrah, from what we saw, had not done anything all game. Yes. So there's no reason to think that she was going to do anything. Lil had all she had done from their perspective was whine about her place in the game, and to their perspective, they had also done a lot for her.
Yeah, and gone along with everything they've suggested.
Yeah. So the only person they could think that could possibly do something is Sandra, who had been acting all day like she was already beaten.
Yeah, and moreover, it doesn't matter if Sandra is the only one that's going to do something. Then there's nothing to be done.
Right.
So like it is, you know, it's very sexist, it's demeaning, just their attitude. It's just a good lesson in Survivor that you should behave and act as though everybody can do something, even if you feel like you're playing with morons who never will, because it doesn't take much, right?
Right.
And $1 million is a strong motivator to do things. But yeah, like two of the more effectual players in the season, and I mean, Burton has been available to be voted out 2 straight times here. He has not had immunity. And they haven't, they were able to save him, and when Tawana went home, and then they were able to just flip it around on Krista. It's like, it seems like they don't want to vote me out. It seems like the bond that we have from Lil is unshakable. Terrible read, obviously. And I think they didn't realize that the bond you have with Lil is something that needs to be refreshed constantly. But constantly. And again, it's great that the arrogance didn't pay off. It's like, I almost get it a bit. You don't do it. It's too risky. It's not worth it. You're like 4 days away. But in some ways, it's like, I can understand beyond being women, which I'm not going to, discount being the primary motivator for those two. But it's like that these specific people is like, what are they going to do?
No, so I think the real motivator, more than just what are they going to do, was I think Burton's just tired of managing Lil.
And because if Burton want to go on one more trip with Lil.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's the thing. He's like, I just want a break from Lil. So, and they're not thinking of taking Darrah, because they want to get rid of Darrah. So, so it's like, it's either Lil or Jon, which, Lil's the strategic decision, but I just think he was tired of dealing with her. And you could tell that from like that conversation in the last episode where we're like, why are you doing this, Burton? And I think it's because he's just exhausted by her because she has to reassure her all the time. But that's the thing. If you want to win the game, that's what you got to do, bud. I don't care if you're exhausted.
It turns out that, goat herding isn't as easy as some people like to think it is. Like, it can just be really psychically draining, especially with somebody like Lil who just needs constant reassurance. And it's just like, I mean, he says it as much, and I think it's true. He just wasn't up for it that day, and he hasn't been. Which is why he does not win this season of Survivor. Like, frankly, I think he might have if he could have just managed Lil a bit. I mean, we don't know how a jury would have treated him being voted out or whatever, but
I think like up against Lil or Jon, I think he would have won, honestly. But
interestingly enough, as he's voting for Lil, he still thinks that he couldn't beat her in a final 2. We're still in that stage.
That is true.
We won't dance around. We won't get too much into that until spoilers, but what do you think, Emma?
I mean, and I think also they were voted out back to back, correct? So he probably also spent, like, Ryan, Skinny Ryan was around, but he probably also spent a decent amount of time with her in Ponderosa. So he has spent a lot of time with Lil and has kind of been primarily the person who's like really hung out with her. So I mean, I think that was it. We've seen people make these mistakes for friendship before, and we'll continue to see them because people like to hang out with people they like to hang out with.
Yeah, and I think it's just a lesson on like what Survivor really is. It's easy to criticize, and again, I want to. They were fucking chauvinist pigs, and it was great to see them to lose and eat it. But it's just like, it's a 24-hour a day, thing. And it's just, this is the mistakes people make on, low sleep, low food, and being around people that they can't stand, even if people they would normally like, but those people are at their worst too. And some of them aren't people they would like at all. Like, frankly, I only want to ever be around 3 people, and 2 of them I helped create. So I totally get why, just like, maybe not Lil. I actually have more to say about this, but I have to save it for spoilers. They leave her there, and this part I didn't quite remember. Obviously, I
didn't either.
That it turns around. This is Burton. This is what we've been looking forward to. But were you surprised that Lil was the one that suggested it? Like, my headcanon had always been like Sandra initiated.
Same. This. No, that was my headcanon too. My headcanon was they're sitting around and Sandra goes, "Why don't the 3 of us vote them out?"
Yeah,
I remembered.
That was very surprising to me as well.
It's Yeah, this is like this is, I guess, the value of rewatching, and
And just being Sandra being like, okay.
Yeah,
sounds good.
Well, the way Sandra perked up, Sandra like her head like shot up. She's like, "Whoa, are you saying this, Lil? Absolutely."
I mean, maybe she was like planning on it and working on it. Like, I'm sure. Like,
I worked on this planet for hours, and she just tweeted it out.
Yeah, no, I'm sure she was going to try something. I mean, Jon and Burton are sure that she's going to try something. I know that at this point in the season, Sandra is the one down number, so this is what I was expecting to happen. But no, and I frankly, in my memory of it, Lil took a little bit of convincing. No, not really. Like, obviously, it takes time for reassurance for Lil to do this thing that she brings up, and as she's having second thoughts and concerns about what the potential blowback for her could be. But
yeah, I think it's like she's fired up because they didn't take her, and they have the audacity to consider voting Darrah their tightest alliance member.
and she leads off with that. She leads off with that. She's like, Darrah, they're getting rid of you next.
Which is honestly a great thing to jump off with.
Absolutely.
But yeah. I feel like the reason is like, this is my motive, not this should be your motive.
Yeah. I don't feel like this is the strategic play in order for me to make the move I want to move. This is me being able to take an opportunity to strike back against what I feel is a grave injustice, robbing Darrah, my dear friend, who I don't know if Lil's ever talked to, of 3 extra days.
I'm not sure anyone's talked to Darrah, but
the challenge yet. So yeah, it was her. She makes this move. She has that, which I think leads into an early segment, a discussion of our weekly segment, because I think we have to put it in here before we go any further. And I think there's some question here. Did Lil suck this week?
Can I go first?
Yes.
No, she didn't.
This is Lil's move, man.
This is her move.
I mean, she kind of sucked a bit on the Darrah thing.
Devil's advocate.
There we go.
Okay.
Yes, she does make that suggestion. That's great. Good job, Lil. However, she also, before all that even happens, so offended that they want to vote Darrah out. That sucks. That's stupid. Then also, she really waffles on her own idea.
So I want to address that point.
I am not done talking.
I'm not saying you are. I'm just saying when you are done, I want to address that.
But yeah,
put a pin in it.
Like really waffles back and forth, and just still is very like Lil in her like, and that will always suck.
Counselor.
Okay, so I agree she does waffle back and forth, but she doesn't suck in that moment. She's pitiable in that moment, because there you see the Lil that has been bullied and beaten down by Jon and Burton this entire time. She's not worried about, it's like, oh, I don't know if this is good for my game. She's worried about the fact that they're going to yell at her, which shows how they've been keeping her in line by berating her and like making her feel like a terrible person, which is why she's been saying all these awful, like weird throwaway comments like, oh, are they going to think, because like they've been undermining her entire self-confidence, which to be fair, I don't think Lil had a lot to begin with. But these guys, you get a peek into something that's kind of dark in my opinion there. And I think she's not, and I don't think she sucks there. She's very pitiable. The first instance, 100% she did suck, but yes.
All right. Sustained.
She also, at this point now, can just stick Sandra on Jon. We've seen Sandra yell at Jon. You think Sandra's gonna just I don't think Sandra cares that much about Lil, but you think Sandra's gonna miss out on an opportunity if Johnny Fairplay starts yelling at Sandra for voting out Burton? You think that he's not gonna end that argument running away?
Which I think is what Sandra basically says.
In your real life, is terrible. But in something like this, where you've got 3 days left in the game, and it's Johnny Fairplay, because that's the play yelling, just be like, all right, man, you're not even, you're not important, because he's not. And also, but I will say, I will concede that it seems like she was really struggling physically at this time with sleep and pain, and I'm sure that affected her psyche. And that is something that, is pitiable, but that doesn't mean that other aspects of her do not suck.
All right, so a point of order. I believe what Lil specifically described as her worry is if Burton wins immunity, then they can't vote for him. Thus, they would vote for Jon, and that was the person she was worried about. I think she was specifically worried about having to face Burton after a betrayal because of the pacts they've made and all that. So I think it's more than just being worried about getting yelled at by Jon, which Emma's point would be like, "What do you care?" My ruling is that Lil herself sucks. And thus, this is a continuation this week, and the things, are like the Darrah thing was just ridiculous. For one, they're asking you, they're not necessarily telling you. I mean, it is a bit of a tell ask, but that's when you can, raise your objections if you're truly a part of this. But moreover, what they are saying makes complete sense, and we're not talking about a lot of difference here. It's 3 days. It's fifth instead of fourth. I don't think this is a deep promise that they've had to Darrah. However, this amazing episode in the annals of Survivor history does not happen unless Lil does what she does. So in the question of did she suck this week versus the question of does Lil suck, I will have to rule with Matt that she did not suck this week, but it is a fine line because of course she continues to suck.
And I have never argued to the contrary.
All right. So as part of this, and I think part of Jon and Burton's thinking is, okay, on the off chance that Lil flips, on the off chance that Darrah, shows some motivation to do anything. The thing we have is that Sandra will do whatever she needs to do to save herself. So all we need to do is offer her, we'll save you, we'll give you a final 3. All you got to do with it is vote with us to take out, at that point, they are assuming it would be Darrah. Should Sandra have taken that deal? It's a question we wrote down, but
no.
No, okay, so that obviously no, because for one, we know the result. For two, fuck you, Jon, and your fucking deals. She's here to screw you and Burton.
And also, why would you trust them? Why
Right.
have they ever given you a reason to trust them?
More interestingly, though, is what I liked about the sequence is before it happens, Sandra calls this shot. Yeah. She says that this is going to be what happened. Now, caveat, maybe her saying that was a conversation she had after it already happened. It's possible. I choose not to believe that because I think it just shows that, while Sandra did not, initiate the move here, I think a strength is that she is seeing everything. She is anticipating what people's behaviors are going to be. She knows that they're going to come to her and expect her to be someone easy to play with. And I think, that spoke well of her, even if, again, she was not the initiator of these moves. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, I agree. I'm not really sure what else.
I'm happy just for people to say, yes, Andy, that was an amazing point, and then we can move on.
Yes, Andy, that was an amazing point.
You're going to make me come up with something just to add to it so I don't have to say that.
So then they come up with this fantastic ruse that, to hold Burton and Jon off. Was that well acted by them, or did it just not matter? It just didn't matter because there's no idols and Burton doesn't win.
The only purpose there was to take the heat off Lil.
Yeah.
The only purpose there was to try to just buy Lil some breathing room so she doesn't have to stand up to their scrutiny and persuasion for however long it is before tribal council. That's the only reason they did that.
Yeah, that's not nothing.
Yeah,
I think that actually is something.
I think, they maybe could have come up with something better, but like you said, I think in this pre-idol era, it's just not that big of a deal. Because they'd probably try, Burton and Jon would probably try something anyway. So, but I do think that she just didn't speak to us. It's not the best lie I've ever heard.
Yeah. like again, like as bad as things go for Burton and Jon, and just a horrible decision. At least they seem to be like, this is kind of fishy. Like so, like it's a dumb
think
play
they
by them.
knew.
It's great to see them lose, but they weren't again. They weren't that far off from what was going on, and ultimately there isn't much you could do other than. But to get what you're saying, Matt, I actually think that giving Lil some level of cover is actually kind of important. That if they full on know that she's flipped, I don't know if she withstands a lot of the guilt and pressure that they for sure would lay on her.
Yeah, I mean the other thing about it is that to give Jon and Burton some credit, which not much, but about like halfway through that reward, they're like, so do you think they're playing against us? And they keep raising it. They raise it a couple times because they know that, okay, they probably talked about this. They had to have talked about this. And so when they get back to the beach and they say, no, it didn't come up, they're like, okay, that's bullshit. And their plan was, well, all we have to do is peel one of the three off, which they make sound easy, but is actually really difficult when there's only 5 people left. Peeling one person away is really difficult at that point. And I think that was their like big mistake in terms of like being really confident. They're like, all we have to do is peel one off, which again is really hard when there's only 5 people left. But no, I think they did know that something was up.
Yeah, just there's no idols. What can you do now? I should say it's not like you can do nothing. Just 2 weeks ago, It seemed like Burton was doomed because Tawana had decreed it so.
And they did try, it didn't work, but they did make an attempt.
That's true.
Well, I mean, that time it did work. They did not end up voting out either, Krista or Burton, right?
No, I mean this time.
Oh, this time, yeah. So yeah, they tried, and luckily the women decided no, it would be really good to get rid of Burton, which again circles back to the original experience. Like, yes, finally, like it should be, it shouldn't have been this hard to get rid of a dominant challenge male. Like this is just from the very beginning of Survivor. This is the time to go after them, and it's not like he was playing so well that there's nothing that they could have done. He wasn't even winning challenges. Instead, it was Darrah, unexpected challenge beast, with her third win in a row. At a time in Survivor which challenges are far more important to the viewership, and thus clearly it led to us getting to know Darrah a lot more and an increased screen presence, right?
Nope.
Well, we know that she lost a lot of weight and she's got tiny little wrists.
Yeah, that was the key to her victory there.
Yeah, I thought it was like a little weird that Probst kept saying. I was like, she's also small anyway. Like, I don't think it was like she lost.
I think it's because she was reaching a lot farther down in the tubes than
she absolutely was. Possible. But I think, yeah, like, I mean, I'm sure, she almost certainly lost weight. She was on more again. But, at a certain point, it's just like your hand width, I have it
probably wasn't a very meaty part of her to begin with.
Right. Yeah, she is a slender young woman. I have a friend who, despite being 5'8", is like a size 5 shoe in women's. On the other hand, I'm 5'5" and an 8, and she's got the tiniest hands, and when she makes a fist, it's like the same width as her wrist. So she would have done great at this challenge. It's so weird.
But yeah, so we are in the penultimate, I can remember that from the beginning now, episode of this season. Darrah is going to be in the finals. She's won 3 challenges. And she's barely in the season. I have very little thoughts of her other than when she showers, the camera sure does like it. I've been led to believe that the purple edit did not come into existence until the highly influential appearance of a Kelly in season 21. Yet here we are, classic Survivor, season 7, 16-person cast, a finalist who does things is invisible.
And someone's going to come at you with math.
Yeah, I know.
They're asking for people to come up with you with an actual confessional account that's going to show the difference. You are playing a fool's game.
come at me, bro, because fuck you and your confessional counts. There is more things to a season of Survivor than having somebody look into the camera and say something obvious. And it's, incredibly frustrating.
Jon lies, but he tells the truth too.
And if her numbers are that, I want you to do a little fancier math and figure out the proportion of her confessionals versus the number of people she is competing with as compared to people who are in 18 to 20 people seasons. Because
that is absolutely math I would never be willing to do.
And
That's
also
why he asked for it.
Fuck your confessional counts. That's not the only piece of visual evidence in the television show. It reminds me of when people were standing for whoever the robbed goddess of Island of the Islands, Julia, and they're all like, early on, she doesn't have any, they're like talking about how low her confessional counts are. Meanwhile, if you looked at like everybody else in her tribe besides Aubrey, they barely had any either, including, Joe QAnon fucking Anglem. Like, I think he had 3, he had 0. And they're all like, this is the show burying her. And it's like, no, this is the show realizing that all the stories with the tribe that's losing all the time. There's more than just confessional counts.
Darrah was on the tribe that was losing all the time.
Yeah. And she's invisible. So what I'm saying is it's always been a thing in Survivor that if you are boring, you do not deserve television time. It's not something that they finally suddenly decided that, oh, we can do this with somebody who quit season 21. Frankly, that even if you don't need to go back as far as Darrah, I'm bringing up now because obviously, this is the season. But Invisibret was only 2 seasons before that.
Oh, Invisibret. So cute.
Yes. So,
but I mean, Purple Kelly did have an extreme amount of invisibility that differed from the you're talking about confessionals, not being everything. She is very much cropped out of other shots. That's definitely a thing. There definitely have always been invisible players. It's just that gave us a name for it.
Yeah, that's all it was because somebody threw that edit. So it's the nickname is something that the fandom talk about. It is not an influential moment to, really go after a minor note, but who cares? Who's listening to this at this point? But moreover, it's just Purple Kelly also did less than Darrah. Darrah has won 3 challenges. She has, been one of 16. She was on a losing tribe. There's every reason why she should have more time as opposed to just being a sidekick and one of 2 people who quit in an episode. And I'd say that Darrah is still incredibly invisible in a way that, frankly, I thought there was more to her. I remember probably just because it's cute mortician girl with an accent, but no, she's laughably uninvolved in the narrative of the season, and I mean quite possibly the ongoings on the island as well. Any other non-spoilery thoughts of this episode?
No, I don't think so. I think the rest is saved for the spoiler section. So.
All right. So now we're going to move on to the Updog. I know, Emma, for those of you who are watching, was doing a bit where she was bored that I was talking. I'm sorry, Emma, that I tried to fill our talking show with talking. I'll try to cut it back and be more like last week when nobody wanted to talk at all.
Yeah, I just think it'd be nice if it was something people gave a shit about. That's all.
The whole point is there's always characters like Darrah who don't give a shit. And everybody should be grateful. We talked about her. Isn't that what people love? Is if everybody that's on the show gets equal or near equal importance because they're all deserving of being talked about. All right, this week's Updog.
I mean, it might. No, there's stuff about that, but that is more spoiler discussion friendly, so I can save that for that.
All right. What's the most mediocre show you love? That's the Updog question this week. So, a show that is not good, but it's not bad. This isn't a guilty pleasure. That's a different discussion. A show that just does not have very ambitious
it's not prestige
goals.
Television.
Not even not prestige. It's just it's okay. It's a show that's okay, modest ambitions, and maybe meets them, but it doesn't matter. You love it anyway. Matt, you didn't quite know what I was going for, but then you figured it out. How about you go first?
Yeah, so we talked this through a bit before we began. I ran some ideas like, is this mediocre? Andy blasphemously suggested Cobra Kai, which is actually good, and don't even like. I mean, it's absurd that he would suggest that. That is a good show, but the most mediocre show that I love is Psych, a show that its only ambition is trying to be the best version of itself, which is a bar where it's like, that C plus, we can hit that C plus every time. Maybe once in a while we'll get a B. Maybe, but we ain't getting no A's. I mean, like, it's a show that is basically meant to be watched while you're like doing something else in the house or just like paying half attention on your phone. It is a show of modest ambitions, of decent competence, and yeah, I like it. I like it a lot.
Why?
It's fun. It's just like a good humored show with like good chemistry between the cast. It has Dule Hill. I love Dule Hill. Who doesn't love
Everyone
Dule
loves
Hill?
Dule Hill.
Yeah, see, everyone loves Dule Hill. It makes, like lots of like in jokes about properties that I love too. They did an entire Twin Peaks episode. That was actually a lot of fun. They've done other ones. They had Carrie Elways on as like as a gentleman thief. It was hilarious.
Good role for him.
It was a good role for him. His name was Despero. It's
Excellent.
a good name for a gentleman thief.
Yeah.
Emma, what was your choice?
Yeah, so when we first talked about it, my initial response is I refuse to say that the OC is mediocre because it's not.
Which was funny because both me and Andy suggested it for you.
No, I would
no,
never.
Andy.
I would never.
Yeah, Andy loves the OC.
Right.
I love season 1 of the OC,
which is why it's not mediocre.
Yeah, I think some part of it is just bad. Actually,
right.
Some of the OC is bad,
Season
but
3
the
is
highs
bad.
are excellent.
Right. And to be fair, I did suggest it just to get Emma's goat. So
yes, but at the same time I was saying it, which was funny. But yeah, so while I can see it seeming like kind of a cop out to like pick a nostalgia thing, my answer is Boy Meets World, because I mean this with all my heart. Because as much as I loved it as a kid, it was something. Somehow my roommate wound up with one of my college roommates wound up with a DVD of one of the later seasons, so we just like would watch that all the time. And I've watched it as an adult, before it was on Disney Plus, it was on Hulu. So I watched all of that, and then Girl Meets World, because I got to see where they ended up. Girl Meets World, not as good, but once they started leaning into the fan service, better.
Can I actually comment on how mediocre Boy Meets World is from a perspective that you might not even realize?
Sure. I mean, I'm going to get into the mediocrity, but go ahead.
On. No, go on then.
Okay. But yeah, so I rewatched it as an adult, still had a great time. But you know what? Any of those, I'm pretty sure every single TGIF show fits in this mediocrity world. And like that's part of sort of the difference between a Girl Meets World and a Boy Meets World. Girl Meets World was a children's show on Disney Channel. Boy Meets World was a family show. And those don't really exist in the same way as they once did, but they do. And why, it has the like mediocrity, well, it has like the craziest amount of in like continuity problems. You have characters disappear. Sean has a mystery brother that he has a sister who disappears. Then finally he does have this brother, the sister disappears, come back as a different actor. Characters just are gone, and Mr. Feeney somehow continues to be their teacher forever. They skip a full year of school. They go from 6th grade to them being like at a high school that's somehow 7th through 12th grade. Then they just don't do 8th grade. It just doesn't happen. But you have an extreme example of Flanderization with Eric, but at the same time, it's funny. It's surprisingly meta for like a show of its type and era. I'm sure it was probably pretty influenced by like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air in that regard, because I know Fresh Prince was like that as well. But yeah, surprisingly meta. You care about those characters even though 18-year-olds shouldn't be getting married. You love them anyway. They actually don't get married at 18 though. They do wait a little bit later. And Sean Hunter was very important to young Emma.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
would you like to make your thing?
Yeah, no, fun fact about Boy Meets World. So it takes place in Philly,
Yes.
which I'm sure you know. And
course.
the place where they always went is a cheesesteak place that I know very well because it is on the same, it's right across the street from the cheesesteak place that I always went to. Now, the cheesesteak place I always went to is considered by many to be one of like the very, very, very best in the city. The place across the street, very mediocre, which is very fitting for Boy Meets World. So,
yeah, I would say not all of the TGIF lineup is mediocre because probably some of it's just straight bad.
Yeah, I was going to say that too. Yeah,
that's fair. Yes, obviously. I guess I should say that's the ceiling. You know,
yes.
for those shows. Yeah, there are definitely some, and I watched a lot of them. I remember the one that the one I believe was called Teen Angel. That the premise was that a guy's best friend ate a like month, maybe years old sandwich under his bed and dies and becomes his guardian angel.
Wait, what?
Yes, this is a show that existed. I watched it.
Homer, are you eating that sandwich again?
Exactly. It's very much that, except the teenage boy dies. They kill the child.
He deserved it. So I think all of us had the knee-jerk, maybe just jerk reaction to say Survivor when this was brought up. But no, Survivor is not a mediocre show. Survivor is actually very excellent for what area it develops in. I think why we think that is among the shows we watch, it is one of the lower regarded ones. We are very much prestige.
We only watch prestige television.
Yeah,
we're snobs.
That, but like I think it's the gold standard for reality competition, and I think it always has been. I think it does many things excellently. So no, if you listeners have Survivor as your answer, you better be prepared to defend why it is a middle of the road show, and I disagree. So that was not where I'm aiming. And again, just to reiterate, is not a show is bad, but you like anyway. That's a different thing altogether. For me, and I think probably why I came up with this topic is I was just, came across my brain for some reason, this show. And I'm like, man, I really like that. But it's not, it's just meh. It's to the point, and in the show I'm going to mention, neither Matt or Emma had heard of. I'm not surprised. If anybody has heard of this show, please reach out. We can talk about it a bit because it is just there. It was on a channel that most people just didn't even think of for having this kind of content at all. And the show was called My Boys. It was on TBS for 4 seasons from 2006 to 2010. And I think they were trying to get into the maybe not quite prestige, but the TV game right around the same time.
TBS, we know funny.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. To be fair, when you shared the picture, then I remember I was like, no way, I do remember hearing about
it.
This.
Looked vague. I certainly never watched it.
Right, no, never watched it. That's for sure, damn sure.
Yeah, I'm sure they probably advertised it during Cubs games or whatever. And like the main character is a sports writer in Chicago, beat writer for the Cubs, right? So yeah, that's something. So yeah, the show starred Jordana Spiro, she's a woman who is one of the guys. She hangs out with her 4 guy friends,
her boys
of the title, and her brother, who is played by Jim Gaffigan. The one thing about it that almost achieves the level of excellence, and that I'm sure they did not write his dialogue for him. They just had Jim come and he would be funny. Reed Scott from Veep is in it. This is
okay.
Yeah, it is just a half-hour like hangout sitcom, but like not smart in the way of like Seinfeld, or even really at the level of Friends. It's just they hang out and they have jokes and the minor observations about life, and there's nothing other than possibly Jim Gaffigan at times excellent or great any other level. But and I think where it started to get attention, thus I started watching it, like TV writers started writing about it, was during the writer's strike, when there's just so little content that people just like discovered something like this. And I don't know why I'm not even recommending it to people, although I have, and other people have watched it and also ended up liking it. Is it just feels good. Like you just kind of want to hang out with these people. They're not particularly funny, but it's funny-esque, but it's not bad jokes either. That's where it's not bad. It is the old, sweater that you don't get rid of and you just feel comfortable wearing. And yeah, I'm like, frankly, like it is just so thoroughly mediocre, and I might just dig out like the DVD somewhere and watch it again right now.
You
Like,
have the DVDs.
Right. Well, but this is what we were
talking. Stream anywhere. The show is
This is very true. But this is what we were kind of talking about, where pretty much like that entire USA, TBS, TNT lineups are like quintessential mediocre shows.
Yeah. The problem is, for me, I don't think I've ever watched an original show on any of those channels, so I don't. But I know my mom's answer for this, because my mom, despite her age, is pretty like hip on the TV taste. We watch a lot of the same shows. She watches a lot of prestige stuff, but hers would be Rizzoli and Isles, because she watches the shit out of that.
That's a good example. Yeah. You might like White Collar because it has Matt Bomer, and he's a very handsome man.
I have heard of that, yes.
Yeah,
and he is. But like, you know what? Matt Bomer's also in Matt?
Chuck.
Well, yes, that's true. And I can see why you thought that was the segue, because we did discuss Chuck. But no, Magic Mike.
Yeah,
Magic Mike.
I realized
and
that.
More importantly, Magic Mike XXL.
Okay.
So it is a debate we had that people can weigh in on comments. Does Chuck qualify? It's right. Like some people might be like, oh well, season 2. Like I gotta say, like when I watched Chuck, again, it's kind of around the same time frame.
Yeah.
It's basically right when prestige TV, starts to take off more than just like the HBO Sunday show. So and like TV criticism is like a weekly thing, and they're finding stuff to write about. So when content starts to go away, that's when Alan Sepinwall talks about My Boys, or Burn Notice was another one to discover.
Burn Notice is a good example. Yeah. That's a really good example.
And Chuck is right around there, so it's like, okay, well, there's not a lot to watch, and like I'm buying box sets or getting them because it's pre-streaming, and I'm like, where's the new Discovery? This is how I discovered like The Wire and all that. So it's like, okay, well, Chuck, and I watched the first season, and I'm like, this isn't good. But it's not bad. Like I don't hate it, but this is what like. Because Sepinwall was a huge champion of that show.
Right. Chuck is great.
And then season 2 comes along. It's like, okay, yeah, I'm into it. And then I got to say, like, I petered out on that show. So, like, for me, I think Chuck qualifies. But, I can see the argument that it's almost just a little too good.
Like, I mean that's where I land, at least. I think I should say I think Psych is more mediocre than Chuck. And the question was the most mediocre show you love.
That's true.
But this part of the fun part of this discussion is that not only do you have to pick a show and you can talk about it and all that, why you love it, but also the debate over what's mediocre, because Cobra Kai is mediocre and I love it.
No,
that's the part of
it. You're just wrong.
It is so cheesy. It is so cliche. The acting, for the most part, other than Billy Zabka, who's just great.
Zabka's great. No, Miguel is really good.
Miguel's pretty good. I actually think so much worse than I remember it acting. His daughter.
But it's smart because it makes him into an asshole. That's why it's a good show, because it doesn't like paint the hero in glory. It shows his flaws, and then it has like
acting shows his flaws. Like you could act really well and get that.
No, I mean the writing shows his flaws, and frankly, the entire Miguel arc, and then also I'd say the Hawk arc, where it takes a kid that starts off as horribly bullied and then turns him into a bully, is a really well-written arc.
That's not much of a spoiler because you don't know who the character is until it starts to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just kidding because I don't watch the show.
I just want you to know, because here's the thing. What I'm saying is, despite all of that, despite the fact that I feel like it is just like, for one, a nostalgia laden. Like, I don't know if this show can mean much to people if they don't have some emotional attachment to at least the first movie. But also, like, it is just teen cliche after teen cliche after teen cliche, like teen television show, which is a part of its strength. By the way, like that would be the one way I'd recommend it to Emma, is this is more teen trash.
I do love some teen. That's actually, you know what? It depends, because I never watched like One Tree Hill. That was
sure. That's probably bad though, is the thing. It is definitely not like I've recommended Cobra Kai to many people. I will probably watch like half of the season the first week it comes out in January.
Oh yeah.
I still don't think it's like a great show. The action, you know what? The action tends to be pretty good, but like every episode, you know where it's going, especially because it's like, this is just the parallel to the thing that happened before. Anyway.
I mean, you're wrong, but that's okay.
But that's, again, this is part of the fun discussion. He is personally offended that a show I'm saying that I love and that everybody should watch is mediocre.
And I will come for anyone who says the OC is mediocre, and I'll kill your family.
Again, like, I would be more comfortable with people who said it's bad than people who say it's mediocre, you know? Like, you
got to average it.
But it reaches such crazy heights and like has such insane ambition for its first 30 episode season.
The first season is 27 episodes.
It's so long,
like, that could have been a series, and it would be untouchable.
Yeah,
it would be untouchable.
I wonder if anybody's answer of the most mediocre show that they love is a drama. Like, I feel like a connective tissue, and maybe it's just because, you know, this is a 3-person sample, is we pick shows that, you know, we just find fun to be in and around, something that is like nice to have on when you're, you know, just to have on.
I mean, Psych is a procedural, which...
Yeah, but you talk about how it being fun.
Okay, here's a mediocre show that I actually really did love, Bones.
You were a Bones watcher?
Oh, yeah.
I did not see that one.
To be fair, I did not get all the way through that because that show lasted really long time. But that was a show that I had that was like, this show is not good. It isn't terrible. It is very mediocre. And I loved it.
Yeah, I mean, it's an hour long. It's a procedural. It deals with a lot of murder and stuff, but it's a comedic undertone to the whole thing, and part of what makes that show,
I guess,
enjoyable.
For
what I know of it, I've never watched it either. But like the winking nods of David Boreanaz. Whereas, like, I don't know if anybody's like picking like Navy 6 or whatever the thing that like
SEAL Team
watch
6
silently as they comment on the Purple Rock podcast after Survivor.
Like, I think it's just SEAL Team.
Yeah,
SWAT? Or is it SWAT?
No, it's SEAL Team. You're right. It's just.
But SWAT's also a show, right?
Yes. But, you know, maybe somebody's answer is like a Law and Order, like not like Mothership and something like that. And
right, SVU, I feel like is something.
But I feel like those shows have hit highs. Like those shows, like usually if you cite those shows, it's because of like certain seasons that, you know, like there have been Law and Order seasons that are really, really good.
Yeah, or you know, SVU is just bad and unhealthy for the world. Or
even like a Grey's Anatomy, which I never watched, but my understanding is, you know, at one point was really excellent.
Right.
And now it's been 15 seasons, and like a scripted show just can't last that long and be good. I don't think.
Right. I mean, look at The Simpsons, a show we all love, and you can't last that long and still be good.
You can't. Yeah, it's just not a thing.
Also a show like, it's probably mediocre now. I don't know. I don't watch it anymore.
Right.
But it's also the show that like you could legitimately call the greatest show of all time. So
I told you guys this, but you know, I had a conversation with my brother recently because his son is finally starting to watch The Simpsons. His daughter did a little earlier, and he was saying, you know, that he's seen fewer episodes than he has seen. You know, there are more episodes he hasn't seen than ones he has seen, but the ones he has seen, he's seen probably like 20 times, and it's his favorite show of all time.
Right.
Yeah, no, like if somebody says, I think the greatest television show in the history of the medium is Simpsons, I'd be like, yeah, okay, I can see it, because you're judging by the highs. Anyway, so yeah, in comments, what you the most mediocre show you love, or debate us on some of the shows would be like, that is not mediocre, how dare you. And especially anybody out there, you want to talk Bye Boys, let's talk about it. I legit don't know what we would talk about, because shit, like nothing happens of import, but just like, hey, I watched that too, that's enough. We'll form a club.
If I can have my closing note on my show, I will say the episode "And Then There Was Sean" is not mediocre. That episode is excellent.
Right, and if I could say one thing, if any one of you come at me with Cobra Kai's mediocre, you're permanently banned from the site.
We have the power.
Okay, where would they be able to comment on this, Emma?
Yes, you can comment on www.purplerockpodcast.com. You can follow the site on Twitter at purplerockpod, or you're probably better off following us at me at Purple Rock Emma, Andy at Purple Rock Andy. Matt, you probably don't need to follow. He doesn't tweet that often, but he's at Purple Rock Matt. And there's some other people, but we don't care about them.
Exciting news.
Tweet at me about Cobra Kai, I will respond.
That's true, actually.
Exciting ways you can follow the show. Of course, you could always follow on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or Google Play. We are now on Spotify. because apparently it's actually not hard anymore. I tried when they were first doing podcasts and I got nowhere and I gave up, because that is the Purple Rock podcast.
If being on Spotify somehow leads to someone I know discovering the podcast, I'm going to be furious.
What are the odds, really?
They wouldn't
I know,
recognize your voice.
It's not as though Apple is a small medium, and
You're like, that sounds like Emily, but her name's Emily, not Emma.
Yeah. You have the perfect cover. How would they ever crack your?
You know how they're
master's
gonna do it?
skills?
They'd be like, there was no way that my friend Emily would like Survivor, but now that I know that there's someone who likes Boy Meets World, I know.
They're like, I'm like never mentioned Survivor before, so it can't be her.
But I knew she ran that Boy Meets World fan site.
But TV is her favorite hobby.
Yeah.
It's true though, and my friends would say that because that's how true it is.
But anyway,
how many people come to me for recommendations?
Yeah, somebody commented, it's like, I can't find you guys on Spotify. I'm like, oh yeah, we gave up on that. And then I just had a quick thought, wait, maybe I should try again. And literally like 30 seconds worth of effort. That's how long it got to get us on Spotify. So we're there now.
The maximum amount of effort we're willing to give.
I'll go a minute and a half. All right, so that's all for this week. Next week is the finale. So you've got 2 hours and possibly a reunion if you're down for that sort of thing. So get to watching, and then we're done talking about this. But we're not done talking about this episode because we're about to get into spoilers.
Spoiler time. It's spoiler time. Spoiler
The also useful spoiler section where we divide pieces of conversation instead of letting it flow naturally for maybe no one.
So many of our listeners clearly stopped listening.
Case in point, you guys were already going down this way of talking, and I couldn't say anything because I wanted to talk about how it ends up. Is that I have a theory about how Lil's, and I see that way I wrote it down, it made it seem like Lil Debbie instead of Lil. Like, who's Lil Debbie?
Little Debbie saved the season.
There's no Debbie. What was I thinking? Anyway, her Debbie Downerism saved this season and possibly the franchise of Survivor. And the reason, maybe you guys can already get there because we're starting to talk about it, is Burton did not pick her on a reward that he should have, that he knows he should have, 100% because she was a buzzkill, simply because he didn't want to fucking ruin his good evening. And as a result, he gets voted out, which is both a thrilling moment for this season, but also the whole Outcast thing was incredibly controversial. Fans were very displeased by this, way of, perverting what they thought Survivor was going to be. If he doesn't get voted out here, he might have won. And thus, this, season would have been won by somebody who was voted out, who everybody, or not everybody, but the great majority opinion of the viewing audience would have been a huge, wrong step. Right as a time when, it's not teetering, because this season obviously did a big booster of the show because of Rupert, but it's no longer the hot thing anymore. So many other flash in the pan reality shows of this time came and went. Ask where Joe Millionaire is at this point. So frankly,
I'm a millionaire, I can tell you that.
Yeah, that if Lil hadn't just been so sucky, just so hard, just such a tough hang, it's possible Survivor doesn't survive. That people just rebel against it. They don't even come back for an all-star season because it's just it jumped the shark of somebody won after getting voted out. How could that ever happen? So anyway, that was just my take. Is maybe which we talk about every week, if Lil sucks, ended up saving Survivor. Or is that a stretch?
I think that it certainly saved the season. I think it's a stretch to say it saved the show.
Yeah, I think doing assuming they were going to do All Stars anyway might have been enough to pull it back. Now, the problem is, All Stars wasn't super beloved. So is that 1-2 punch enough? But I do think it's notable that, obviously Burton was in the game longer, but if you think of it, the fan reaction to Chris Underwood winning, but without the decades of attachment that so many of us have to this show, where it's really only been around a few years. I
this
think
is at a point where
it's
people are
different.
evaluating whether they are like Survivor fans or it was the thing they were watching because everybody was watching it, right? You know, you'd see it with American Idol or something. Like the audience market share was dying down. Yeah, again, maybe All Stars would have been enough. Now, as you say, it's not a super well received thing. I don't know if that was the majority opinion among like just casual fans. I certainly think they probably recoiled at like a few of their favorites not doing well, but I also think they probably enjoyed the Rob and Amber love story enough.
That's true. I mean, Rob and Amber did very well for themselves.
Well, it was enough to power The Amazing Race through their highest rated season in a long time. Enough for them.
It got you and I watching The Amazing Race.
Yeah, enough to get them a televised wedding, right? So like,
so bad.
Like, I think while the fandom has decided that All Stars was something they really did not like, I don't know if that, like, again, we'd have to see Vanuatu's numbers, but frankly, like a reason why they were in there, like a reason why they were able to sell out Madison Square Garden for the finale of All Stars is in part because Pearl Islands had left them already there. Whereas this is like, Pearl Islands where, somebody got voted out wins. 2 seasons prior is Thailand. Like, it is obviously a stretch to save the franchise.
So can I propose a hypothetical that might be a bit more, that I think might be a bit more on solid footing? We saw the fan reaction after Chris Underwood won, and we saw the producer reaction to that fan reaction, which was to basically be like, okay, we might actually now get rid of this whole playback mechanic, except when it's like really needed for winners to get all the best winners on. Okay. Would they have ever done Redemption Island if Burton won, or would a backlash to Burton have kept for us from like the more recent examples of this mechanic?
Well, I think if we think about how long of a layoff they had between Outcast and Redemption Island anyway, and Redemption Island coming in that Rob Russell season, I don't think it changes because I think they're there. The purpose was to try to save Rob and Russell. Also,
I guess the question is, do they keep using it then?
Well, yeah, I think that they already had the blowback even without Burton winning. So, and then they just never had somebody come back and win until Chris Underwood did. And I'd say, I don't think the producers learned their lesson until not only they bring it back in a season that, you're positing that it makes more sense. I think is that they didn't know that everybody hated it so much until everybody kept saying that they hated it, even with Winners at War.
Yeah, and not just fans, but when you had even the winners on the show being like, we don't want this.
Yeah.
Some of them
definitely did, though,
Well, I think legit, it's very possible that one guy did, and that's why it happens. And I'm sorry, but sometimes the team bus stays to pick up LeBron. That's just how it goes.
Also, I mean, I think what was reported is like in the sort of unaired thing, it's like Amber wanted it, which makes sense. And it was like Sarah and maybe Nick, which is interesting. I remember there being like a couple of people who were for it. But that's also with conjecture because we didn't actually like see that footage. I also would like to acknowledge that Chris Underwood's Kickstarter is so bad that we've mentioned him several times and I haven't made a single pervy comment.
Yeah.
Very proud of you.
Tragic.
I don't actually know if that's what it is. So
it's so sad.
Yeah, which Survivor male grossness was worse that we watched this week? Fair Play and Burton on the reward, or Chris Underwood's sexually themed, often racist Kickstarter.
I think the racism brings them down.
Over the top, sexism is equal. Love all the sex acts that are basically just abuse on women, but then the racism really.
Yeah, a nice soupçon of racism on top there.
Yeah, because say what you will about Johnny Fairplay and Burton, but at least in what we saw, nothing they did was explicitly racist.
I'm
heavy
sure
on the
that
explicit.
We missed some of it.
Heavy on explicit.
But anyway, it was a thing that, as I'm watching, was like, wait a second. The fact that Lil sucks so bad actually works out in the favor of this show. Because if she is just a little less tough to deal with, she goes on the reward. They vote out Sandra. Well, let's talk about that. this saves Sandra, right?
Considering Darrah wins immunity, yeah, I think so.
Well, no, but would Jon and Burton have targeted Sandra, or would they still have wanted to get out Lil, because that might have still posed problems?
Yeah, if they're still believing that Lil's the hardest to beat, then maybe the plan to then get Sandra to just flip to save herself actually works, because it's not Sandra does not have a counter maneuver because Lil was not there to make it.
Right.
Yeah, I'm just not sure if they have the same level of motivation to get rid of Lil, but I mean, it's possible. I mean, they all apparently think they can't beat her, so I guess that could be their motivation. But also, they're wrong, but they have to think, especially if Burton is in it, that in that final 3 challenge, they're not going to have to worry about her.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Why didn't they go after Sandra anyway, right?
I don't know. I honestly don't know why they targeted Lil there.
Yeah. Well, so what changes? I guess the good times that they had with Lil at the reward, maybe that's it. And she just sucks a little bit less. Probably not. In fact, if they pick Lil for the reward, Burton
then they might come back and be like, we got to get rid of Lil.
I plan on winning another reward. She has to go. We should have voted her out instead of Chris.
One thing actually, shoot, I had this. Is, let's see if I can talk through it. So you have
podcast.
Sandra. I know. I totally had a thought and I lost it. So, okay. So, Burton in his voting confessional, or after he gets voted out, is like, "Oh, Lil, I hope you can live with yourself betraying the alliance," which he has obviously also betrayed. But to me, indicates that at least some, maybe he's putting it on, but at least some of his motivation is this sense of like, oh, I don't think Lil is with us anymore, or at least she's waffling, so we can't be sure about her. And if he takes her on the reward, he probably does not have those feelings anymore.
It's possible. I think that he's always going to have that. I mean, it's amazing how immediate that level of hypocrisy is how dare morally this person do to me what I was in that exact moment doing to them. It is a Survivor classic. It never goes out of style. How dare you do this thing that I was doing to you? I don't believe this is even the first instance of it. And it will live on until the days of like Sidney Gillum and stuff. But it was the perfect, finish to what a dirtbag Burton was all episode. That in that exact moment. And frankly, it harkens on to what will happen to Lil at the end of this season. Even after she wins the challenges, man, Lil, the challenge beast, is ready to go.
Wins one challenge.
Well, she just wins the final one. She doesn't win 4.
No, honestly, yes.
I don't think anyone wins 4. I think it's one of those
4
challenges
is like
they all
the
lose.
Jury wins. It's very dumb.
It's one of those dumb ones.
Okay, there we go. Yeah. I was just assuming it because I'm like, well, I know Sandra and Johnny don't win.
Right, and obviously it's not Darrah. Yeah.
Right.
Weird.
Also,
because I think if the jury wasn't the option, I think like Darrah probably would have just won her way into the end and maybe won.
I think so.
She might have. Which actually brings me to my other thing. I think one reason I totally agree that, you know what, if you're boring, you don't get a lot of attention. I think that's totally valid because these people are ultimately on our screens to entertain us. However, I do think, in terms of like Darrah and Invisibret especially, there would be value in showing more to them because it would make them seem like viable options to win when they're winning like all these challenges. Although I will say, but let's keep in mind he's very new. When this episode ended, I was like, oh hey, so we have the finale next. Like, who do you think's like 4th, 3rd, 2nd? Who do you think is gonna happen? And he's like, well, I mean, with these challenges, it really seems like it's Darrah's to lose. It was like, you've been predicting Sandra this whole time. Yeah. Except for that brief few weeks when it was Andrew, but when it was Savage. But it was like, it's predicting Sandra this whole time, and Darrah wins 3 challenges.
Yeah, but to the point, I guess, where he's at is the deck is cleared now. Like, why would you assume
who's gonna stop her?
Right. Yeah, there's no Burton. Like, because I did, I tried to be like, well, it's like, well, she's one Jon. I was like, yeah, but they've been very different kind of things. It was a word search, it's shooting, and then having small hands. And I was like, but her competition is also not the strongest when it comes to challenges.
To say the least. Possibly 3 of the very worst,
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh man, it's gonna be fun to watch Lil win that.
Yeah, I'd say the counter to the Darrah thing is, I don't know if back then we were thinking that this person hasn't received enough visibility.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
I'm sure true. I'm sure I definitely wasn't at the time. I do think with Brett, it would have been a valuable thing.
That was at that point, who could win but the one person getting screen time on that season?
Right, like they already had leaned into that so hard, but
well, except that of course that person did not
win. Yeah, which is like but also Brett was I just thought he was the cutest little thing watching that.
Another notable thing that happened, this here underlined what Sandra's anybody but me truly is, and how it works to her advantage. It's not that she's going to flip on allies left and right and has no loyalty. It's that everybody believes that they can get Sandra to work for her. And what's even better is she knows it. She knows that that's the vibe that she puts out there. And frankly, this is where maybe working with fair play in that instance to save Burton actually works out well for Sandra in a way. Obviously it did not for Krista. Is that everybody assumes that there's no value in voting out Sandra because she's legendarily poor at challenges. This is already a thing in her.
This is her at her prime. She's 29 years old.
Well, this is her physical peak.
Yeah.
And still, so in terms of somebody who could then throw a monkey wrench into my plans of winning, she's not that. And she'll vote with us if it makes sense for her to do so. And I don't know if I don't have anything more to say. It's just I felt like it was worth pointing out. This episode really underlined both in what she says and what fair play says is what the true strength of her game is. Is there anything?
I agree.
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting, kind of telling that it's really almost Burton who's the one who verbalizes that this is her strategy, because it shows how much value there is in her being perceived this way.
Mm-hmm. And I think the counter value also is it works that keeps her around, but it's also why everybody underestimates why she could win, because they view it as she's not doing anything. She's just hanging around, and if we throw her a bone, she'll take it. Not realizing that actually juries do end up respecting that, in part because they don't feel, angered by it. She is able to do things to save herself, vote people out without ever taking the heat for it. And I think that's really valuable in especially the eras in which she plays with it. I'm not sure it would be as valuable in later eras.
Right, and it's it's hard to tell, because when she's played in later eras, she's been Queen Sandra with 2 wins, so she's not really getting that opportunity the way she still managed to in Heroes versus Villains.
Yeah, she had to play different types of games to try and succeed.
Yeah, it's actually insane that she won twice playing almost the same game. And again, is that most people do play the same game more than once because their game is, this is the kind of person I am. It's just amazing that actually worked for her. And I think it's because, you could
argue it worked for the other 2-time winner too.
That's true. He played a little differently though, but look what happens when a winner plays very different than their winning game. JT.
No, people like to throw that as they play the same game every time as a criticism. It's I want you to point out to me the incredibly versatile, switching it up. This is my jazz album. This is my rock album. This doesn't happen. Their games are, I am this kind of person, and this is the effect I have on people. And Sandra was lucky enough that her initial win was not respected enough that she could be a winner to come back and not be a threat.
And a long way off too.
Yeah, it was far enough away that it wasn't fresh in people's minds.
Yeah, honestly, if All Stars had been season 10 instead of 9, she might come back for it, and that enough might have been a reason. Or 8.
All Stars was 8. Yeah.
8. Okay. If it was she didn't want to go back to back, if she had come back and just been in that season, that might have been enough to raise her profile. But then being in that season, Heroes versus Villains is the next time she could ever be on, because Micronesia, they, consciously
didn't know when. And, so many of the cast were 3-time players, and the ones who were 2-time players, primarily just played. I think people who played, probably Danielle had the second longest layout, not counting the All-Stars people, but of 2-time players with playing at 13.
Oh yeah, because
Or
Stephanie
12,
was a 3-time player. You're right. Yeah.
Nope. Tom.
Yeah. There you go.
There you go.
Which, speaking of you making up All-Stars, I always think Palau is season 9. It's not, but
nope, because everyone forgets Vanuatu.
Yeah, there you go. Anyway, and the other reason is I think Russell had no idea who she was, and that helped.
There's also that, yes.
Okay. Anything else for this week, spoiler or not?
Yeah, I think we covered a lot, and we have a whole bunch to talk about next week, I guess.
Home stretch, baby.
Almost done.
Hit the theme music.